Mihi o te tauhou, nau mai, haere mai ki tēnei hui. Lovely to see you all again and welcome to our first official briefing for the long-term plan. I would like to open the meeting with some comments from Mea Whānau.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back, and what an exciting meeting to really kick off the year with. This is the good stuff. But in digging into this long-term plan briefing, well, first of all, thank you to officers for putting this together. This has been a very well-planned and lengthy process to get to this point, which of course will continue with input from us and the public, which is great. In terms of some of the priorities for this presentation, so obviously water infrastructure is a top priority in this long-term plan budget. So what officers are putting forward for consideration today is a recommendation to significantly increase investment in water. So we're looking at over $1.1 billion to spend on capital projects like renewing water and waste pipes, and over $600 million in operating costs. We are also considering the rollout of water meters. And on top of this, because obviously this is a regional issue, we are working very closely with our regional stakeholders as well. So there's obviously been a lot of reprioritisation. Our officers have done a really fantastic job at finding savings everywhere, which they will take us through. So again, thank you to officers for doing that. It is a tough process, and we may not all like some of the proposals. I know I don't, but that's the tough decision that we have to make. I mean, one includes possibly rephasing the Golden Mile, and what that means is prioritising Courtney Place, which is, of course, I've signalled that I really want, and others have too, and diverting some of the planned work from Lambton Quay into other renewals. To be clear, the Golden Mile will continue, but we are now open to rephasing some of that into the later years. Upgrades to Lambton Quay, yeah, will still proceed, but at least we can free up a bit more money now for our pipes. After we've received this briefing, of course, councillors are going to have a range of views. We have had a lot of opportunities to input into this, and that will continue. So I welcome your feedback. I don't want to overcomplicate the process in terms of how we contribute to this paper. We just need to talk to our colleagues, gauge support for certain amendments, and we have a meeting set for a couple of days before the actual paper as well. So let's get on with it.
Thank you. And our CEO, Barbara McKerrow, is also going to make a few opening remarks.
Kia ora koutou. I'll just ask the team to move to the next slide. Thank you. We will show you the agenda for today's briefing. So I'm quickly going to talk about the purpose of the briefing, obviously to build on multiple briefings we've held with you over the last year and the previous year, but in particular to prepare you for the next key report, which you'll be debating on the 15th of February. That report will be important because the decisions you make will form the basis and mandate for staff to go away and prepare the long-term plan consultation document. That's a key document. It's subject to audit. It needs to set out the legislatively significant matters that we need to consult on with our community, although there will be many, many other aspects to the plan that we will invite feedback on. The agenda for that meeting will, as normal, go out 7 days in advance. Between this briefing and then, we will also be scheduling Q&A sessions. So if you have any remaining questions to ask after today's briefing, please make sure you make use of those scheduled briefings, because we want to make sure you feel as prepared as possible for the debate you will have. And I will now hand over to Stephen. You'll see we've got quite a list of items to get through, and we're all sharing the presentation. So
And just before Stephen starts, I just want to let you know there'll be about 4 opportunities for questions, and so we will pause after each significant question, after each significant section, and I will take questions. However, I'll be looking the room and make a list as soon as you have them, so just put your hand up whenever and I'll take your name down. Thank you, Stephen.
Kia ora, councillors, and probably just to reinforce the point, it has been quite an intense process to get to here, and today actually is the 24th workshop/briefing that we've had on the LTP. So if it feels like there's been a lot of discussion, that would be right. Now, this slide that's up there now pretty much has been covered, just really to reinforce the 15th of February is an important meeting in the sense that decisions that you make there enables us to go away and shape the draft consultation document that comes back in March, which can then go off to audit. So as Barbara said, the point of today's briefing is really to give you some visibility of what's actually going to come up on the 15th. You've seen this before, the question about a challenging environment. This is my 6th LTP, and it is the most challenging, I think, of my career, but pretty much every other local authority is facing similar challenges. We have some particular challenges here that maybe some others don't around our infrastructure, being in terms of earthquake prone, and obviously there's been a lot of discussion about water, which I won't cover off in this brief intro. Affordability, clearly there has been inflationary pressures due to interest costs, and that's kind of playing out in terms of how much the council can afford, and obviously the balance sheet resilience, which I think you're all well across. Just in terms of where we're at, we are on track with where we thought we'd be and where we need to be in terms of the 15th of February meeting. Obviously, it is a really tight process, which we need to kind of work our way through in terms of audit and consultation, and getting that consultation document out to the public in April. We have been working with Audit New Zealand. Obviously, they are our auditors, and they audit our draft consultation document and obviously all the underlying information. They've already been liaising with us, what's called a cold review, looking at documentation that's already sitting there in the background. The formal audit begins in March, which is not very far away. Obviously, the council has to adopt a draft consultation document for our auditors to, properly consider that. But there are some things that they can do ahead of that, which they are actually doing. So that's probably all I want to say, and I'm going to hand over to Andrea.
Kia ora, koutou. So the purpose of this next session is just really to highlight where we've come from in terms of setting our budget. The draft budget will be provided to you on the 15th of February, or as part of the 15th of February package that Barbara talked about. So just as a bit of a reminder, the draft budget that's being prepared has been made up of a number of different decisions that have been made by you as elected members. The main one being the decisions that you made on the 9th of November. Post that 9th of November meeting, we started the budget preparation process in earnest, and we ended up starting with approximately a 26% rates increase at that point in time. Following that, there was a very significant exercise undertaken across the organisation, doing a line-by-line review to ensure that we were reflecting everything, and really managing our budgets. And those things we're looking at a couple of the bullet points that we've got on the slide, making sure what we were doing was aligned on the outcomes and the priorities that you had set, making sure that the work that was doing was appropriately phased over a 10-year period, and also making sure that some of our CapEx was reprioritised accordingly. So that then led us to a rates increase of 21.7%. And we discussed that 21.7% with you in December at a workshop with a number of options to bring that down to 13.8%. So there was 5 different options that we've been working on, and we're going to cover those 5 different options later on in this presentation. So we're going to work through those, including the levels of service cuts that we are proposing, or the changes that we're proposing to make those savings. So for now, this was just to remind you where we've been and where we've got to, and we're going to go through some of that discussion throughout the course of this presentation. So here is the reminder from the 12th of December. We started with that 21.7%. We've made a number of assumptions, and again, these will be brought to you on the 15th of February for decision making. That gets us down to 13.8%. Now, just noting, we have not included in those figures in the 12th of December any funding for water meters or additional funding for water, and we're going to come to that next. What we also reflected in the 12th of December is that our capital expenditure program, particularly for years 1 through to even 6, is tight. And even with that rephasing, it's going to be a challenge within that existing program that we'd landed on around 12th of December to stick within our own debt to revenue ratios that we've set. Noting that they are our own internal policy settings, we do have the capacity to borrow more because we do have a very conservative debt to revenue ratio as it stands. And that's all I was going to cover there.
Can you please move to the next slide? Thank you. So, one of the key topics of the day, 3 waters. And obviously, this is a core mandated service for councils in New Zealand to deliver. And it's very clear that we all agree that a well-functioning network is a high priority for the city and the region, and actually not only the region but also New Zealand as a whole. And we all know that our network as it stands is not performing as we would like it to, due to a combination of factors, the age of the infrastructure, legacy investment issues which have accumulated over a very long period of time, exacerbated by the seismic activity that Wellington regularly experiences. And there is seems to be a view among the industry, both plumbers, private industry, but also local authorities, that there was a noticeable increase in problems with our water infrastructure following the Kaikoura earthquake. Now, it's very important for local authorities to work with the government of the day, and we're very familiar with the local water done well position of our new government. And it's worth just reflecting on these things, because it is this outcome that we will be working with the other councils of this region to build on and achieve. There will be greater central government oversight, clearly signalled, economic and quality regulation. But it's very important that there is a local government-led approach to developing the fit-for-purpose model of the future. And in this case, the intention would be a new kind of council-controlled organisation, or CCO, that is able to operate in a financially sustainable way, that is able to report adequately on the rules and regulatory measures, that is able to be fully accountable to the communities it serves, and is able to invest in the areas that are needed. And when we talk about financially sustainable, that does mean sufficient revenue, balance sheet separation from councils, ring fencing and funding for growth. And it is the constraint that most local authorities in New Zealand are currently experiencing, that our balance sheets are constraining the ability to invest in this infrastructure at the pace that would be ideal. So that's a key priority. Next slide, please. And so just a little reflection on what we've done so far, but most importantly, we'll be talking to you soon about what we think we should do next. But as a reminder, during the last long-term plan, which was approved in 2021, there was a significant increase in funding for Three Waters, with the capital program around $678 million over the 10 years of the plan. That accounted for a 33% increase on the previous year. And of course, around that time, the council of the day did a lot of work. There was a mayoral task force on Three Waters, and there was a considerable increase of attention and the need to invest more in our infrastructure. And since 2021, there have been ongoing increases in funding on an annual basis, with contributions substantially higher than what was provided for in the current long-term plan. And that, over the last 3 years, has been $29 million of operational funding, most of which has been directed towards drinking water and fixing leaks. And clearly, that's very important to our community. Now, on the 21st of November, Wellington Water did present a range of investment options to you for the 2024 long-term plan, and we've considered all of those, and you are well aware of all of those options, including the unconstrained option. It's very important for the local authorities of Wellington Water to understand what an unconstrained budget would look like. For this local authority and all of the other shareholding councils of Wellington Water, the unconstrained option is unaffordable within the current constraints of our balance sheets and ability to rate our community. But what we do want to do is put to you the greatest level of investment we can achieve in this long-term plan in the meantime for our Three Waters network. And we will cover that next. One of the most significant issues for our long-term plan will be our investment in our Three Waters infrastructure. So that will be one of the key areas of consultation that we need to prepare for our consultation document, which will mean we need to articulate options and we need to articulate your preferred option, and officers have recommendations to discuss with you. So I'll hand over to our Chief Infrastructure Officer, Siobhan Proctor, to take you through these options in more detail.
Barbara, kia ora, councillors. Right, so we've got 3 options that we've been working up with staff at Wellington Water, who have been doing a great job in supporting us to try and develop these options. So thank you to them for their efforts. The first option is the option that was presented in the programme for 12th of December. So this option included basically a build-up of the budget from 23-24, the current budget, plus any unavoidable cost increases. So for OPEX costs, that equates to $53.5 million, so around 600 million over the LTP period. And for CapEx, this was the baseline option that was option 1, presented by Wellington Water at the 21st of November workshop. And that totaled 896 million over 10 years. In terms of the impact for that, so that's what's included in the waterfall chart that Andrea pulled up before, which contributes to the 13.8% rates impact in year 1, and the debt impact of 900 million. The second option looks at the inclusion of water meters. So that option, again, is option 1, but with the inclusion of water meters. So the water meters costs, the additional for that is the 2.4 million, and that's in OPEX. So that's really the cost of the work required to really do the thorough investigation and planning to ensure that we can roll out these universal meters region-wide, have a region-wide approach which is fit for purpose for the region's network. The CapEx cost for those, we're using what has been provided by Wellington Water, so that's $122 million for the rollout from year 4. So we will caveat this is what we've put in for budgetary purposes. That investigation in the first 3 years will actually really determine what the cost of that's going to be. So there's still a level of uncertainty over what that cost is, but that's what we've been given by Wellington Water to include in this option. Again, just a note there, we are assuming that the water meter is budgeted through CapEx. So the current option is that Wellington Water does the rollout, they own the meter, we own the meters, etc. There are options where you can have metering as a service, which would actually be an OpEx solution. So again, that planning and investigation piece will determine what the best option is for the region. If we look at the impact on rates, so that option 1 was 13.8%. The additional 2.4 million in OpEx is a 0.5% increase in rates, and then the 122 million impacts our debt. So that gives us a capital investment over the period of just over $1 billion for that. Our recommended option is option 3. So again, we've built up these options. So we've got everything from option 1, we've got water meters from option 2, and plus we've included any additional investments in drinking water. So really focusing on the issue of addressing the drinking water issues that we've got across the network. So we've got an increase in OpEx, which will be targeting, again, detection, leak detection and fixing, as well as quite a few different projects that we will be applying CapEx to, which are in this option. So, as Mayor Whānau alluded to at the beginning, if we complete Golden Mile in 2 stages, that actually releases around $16 million in the first few years that can be redirected to renewals in other areas. We want to target the existing water renewals network to priority areas. So what that would mean would be we would complete Courtney Place as in the first 2 to 3 years, and that comes with around $6 million worth of water renewals at the same time. Additional CapEx funding will be applied for pressure control valve management. So this is currently being piloted across Wellington region, and this is where we put valves in to actually reduce the pressure in the network. And what that does, if you can control the pressure, you can reduce the number of pipe bursts. So we're very supportive of that, and that equates to an additional funding of $3 million in the first 3 years, and around $7.8 million total. And the last one is reservoir capacity. So we've got a reservoir at Bell Road. It's over 120 years old, I think, almost 120 years old, so it definitely needs renewing. In order to do that, we need to create and build another reservoir to ensure the capacity is available in this part of the city while Bell Road Reservoir is renewed. So that has a double whammy effect in terms of really catering for a bit more growth in the area as well. It gives us more capacity. And the total capital cost of that's $91 million. Again, it's in the early stages of planning, so the timing and phasing of that is yet to be confirmed with Wellington Water. So if we look at how all those options stack up, or option 3, all of the investments in option 3 stack up, again, starting from option 1, 13.8%, adding on option 2, 0.5%, and then the rates impact from the additional OpEx provided for leak detection and repair is 1.1%, and then the debt impact for the additional capital investment that we're recommending equates to another $99 million. So in total, that provides for a CapEx investment through the LTP of $1.1 billion. Really important to note that our 21-31 LTP was $678 million. So this is a $440 million increase in that investment, which equates to 65%. So a significant increase in investment.
Shall we stop for questions now? I have some.
Yep, so I've got transport as well, but I'm happy to.
Oh, shall we do, we'll do transport because, yes. Water. Okay, Councillor McNulty.
Thanks for everything so far. Just on the water meters, because I note that we've gone from 50 to 122 million in the space of 3 years. So have Wellington Water said they're specifically open to looking at other options like lease back and renting? It's not just going to be they've decided to own the infrastructure and that's what they're pushing down the track to us?
Yeah, absolutely. That's all part of that planning investigation. We absolutely want to see all of those options explored to make sure that we're doing the most deploying the most cost-effective option.
I get that's our position. I just wondered, have Wellington Water signalled that they're willing to be flexible and look at those other options, or are we still... Okay.
We've already started working on developing that case with them.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Wineta.
Oh, yes.
We can swap. So in terms of the Golden Mile rephasing, is just to be utterly clear, is the purpose of it purely a cost saving, or is it a works issue, i.e. are we digging up the Lambton pipes before laying the new street on top?
No, so we're putting this forward as a means of relieving the capex pressure in the first few years.
Councillor Calvert.
Just in terms of the Golden Mile, with these extra water costs, why weren't they advised to us when we approved the funding for the Golden Mile in June 2023?
We were still undertaking the potholing to determine what needed to be renewed and replaced at that point, and still undertaking design as well. The intention was always to fund that, so we've been funding the design of that through the Wellington Water budget this year as well, in terms of designing what's required for those renewals. So it was always intended that the Wellington Water budget would fund those renewals, which was the same as Thornton Quay, the Aotea Quay roundabout.
But you didn't flag that to us in June as part of that would be an extra cost on top of the Golden Mile budget?
It's not an extra cost, because we'd only be renewing the pipes that would be required to be renewed within the next 5 years. So basically it'd be about prioritising the renewal program within the Wellington Water budget.
And so these options that have been presented, are they the options from Wellington City as opposed to Wellington Water? Because what's Wellington Water's recommended option?
Yep. So in the capex space, Wellington Water presented two options back in November. One was the baseline budget, which was, I think, our option one for capex, and the other one was the unconstrained. So that equated to 1.8 billion. So that's clearly unaffordable. So we have worked with Wellington Water to come up with these additional options.
Okay. And the thing is, how are we allowing for catch-up? Because in 2021, while we increased our water infrastructure budget by 33%, Wellington Water's recommended option was to increase it by 127.5%. So our 33 was much lower than what was recommended back then, and that was for $1.5 billion worth of capex. We chose a much lesser option of less than half at 678 million. So it seems to me that we were not funding sufficiently as recommended from Wellington Water back in 2021, and we're still not funding them close to where they're recommending. And how is this going to address essentially the leaks over the next 3 to 5 years? I know we can't fix everything all at once, but I'm really concerned that the options being presented are not anywhere near as sufficient as they need to be. And have you got another option for us?
So this is the option we've come up with in terms of ensuring that the impact on rates is manageable, but also the impact on our revenue, debt revenue ratio limit, because that's our real constraint here when it comes to capex.
But could you give us, I mean, may not be able to do it today.
I think Councillor, the CE would like to answer the question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think it's important we explain that there are two key steps here. One is for the shareholding councils of Wellington Water to put forward the maximum amount they are able to fund within our current constraints, our debt capacity and our ability to rate our community. But the other piece of work, which is very important and one we are working on now with the other local authorities, is the future model that can enable a more financially sustainable mechanism for delivering the service that the region needs, and that is work that is being done all over New Zealand, but that is the ability to set up a new kind of council-controlled organisation that can operate truly off balance sheet, and that will require government legislation. And that is something that the local authorities of the region support, as far as I'm aware, and I'm certainly working with the other chief executives on how we advise our respective councils and the Wellington Water Committee on that. So the options that have been put forward to you today, option 3, the one we're recommending, is the maximum we can put forward within our current constraints. And that's something we are recommending in concert with Wellington Water staff who have sat in the office with us and worked on these options with us.
And I think it's also useful to point out that option 3 is the unconstrained, so it is the top option that Wellington Water provided for drinking water. So we've focused on drinking water, so it does meet their recommendation in terms of their unconstrained for drinking water investment.
Yeah, yes, but I'm also concerned about our wastewater pipes, where they are, and the investment needed for those.
Questions, Councillor?
Yes. So I would like, and maybe we'll have to take this offline, but I would like to see a bigger option, another option, showing how we can invest more also in our wastewater and our stormwater, because they are equally as critical. Because I know
we're getting into speeches. We'll take.
Okay, but I would like.
Okay, I've got other councillors with questions, so I can put you back on the list if you've got any unanswered questions. Councillor Pannett.
Thank you for your work. And actually, my first question leads on from Councillor Calvert's. When we talk about an unconstrained budget, are you able just to provide a list of things that won't be funded under these options? Because, of course, I've been told prior that we're not able to fund everything, and then we come up with a new crisis.
I think it's in the November 21st presentation was the list of all of the investments.
Okay, so we'll be able to tell exactly when the papers come, what's in and what's out? Okay, because I guess that would be my concern around stormwater from a climate perspective. We've got earthquakes coming, so are there cuts to that kind of work?
No cuts.
There are no cuts.
Or work that's underfunded because we need to keep going with them. So stormwater I'm particularly concerned about. That's just a
we can
looming
make
crisis.
that clear. The stormwater investments in the unconstrained that aren't being funded when we bring the paper back.
Okay, so we'll get that. And just my last question, have you had a chance to talk to mana whenua about their views on this level of investment?
No, not yet. It's been worked up very recently.
I can say, though, informally, I have had discussions with the two chief executives.
Councillor Randall.
Yes, I've got a slightly different question, really. Up in the rates impact, you're looking at a baseline of 13.8%. That's sort of the level we're aiming at. Does that include or exclude the 2% levy for the sludge treatment plant that will also add in?
It excludes any additional costs for the sludge treatment plant, so that will be on top of the 13.8%.
Okay, and so I guess for most Wellingtonians, just to confirm, that will be 2% on top of that number, which will be 15.8%.
We haven't calculated the actual percentage that will go on to rates bills, but we will ensure that that's included in our financial strategy and all the underlying information for the 15th of February as well.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Free.
My question is to do with sewage and Moa Point, because we've had quite a few discharges due to overflows, and there's some concerns, I suppose, about whether that plant needs more maintenance. So my question is, have we set aside enough money to ensure that the Moa Point treatment plant is fully maintained so that we minimise the chances of untreated sewage discharges?
There is a significant amount for Moa Point. I don't think we've funded everything that's been asked for that plant, but I'd have to come back to you on that.
Councillor McNulty?
There's two more. So I noticed you said that 1.8 billion was the unconstrained. There's been media that Wellington Water are now saying 2.5 billion is the investment. So I'm guessing where this 700 million has come from. Have you had any Okay, so they've just put it into the media. Are you confident of Wellington Water's ability to deliver on the CapEx and OpEx projects that they've outlined with this increased funding?
Yes, they've been very clear that they can deliver this. They've told us in the November workshop that they could deliver the unconstrained.
Deputy Mayor Foon.
Yeah, kia ora, and thank you for the mahi. Just two questions. One was around, we've got the petition for Houghton Bay tomorrow, so I just want to check, there was a proposal from officers for $7 million to fix that. Is that going to be in the options?
No, I don't think that is an option 3.
Okay, thank you. Another question, metering as a service, what is the process we will go through to unpack those options and timelines, etc.?
Yeah, so it's pretty much like building any case for investment, really, that you articulate all of the options, come up with some criteria by which you're going to determine which one's the preferred option. So we'll be, Wellington Water have started on that work now, so yeah, we'll just have to keep across that.
Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, just going back. How can I request from officers another option around providing more investment into our water infrastructure, both for renewals and for growth?
I think, well, I'm happy to answer that. I think that would be through a resolution on the 15th of February.
So there won't be any other options other than this being presented?
The ones that we've outlined today are the ones that we intend to bring forward in terms of the 15th in the papers, but of course that's up for debate on the 15th.
So if I ask for officers, if I get a resolution and it gets passed for officers to work through another option, is that enough time then to factor into determining our draft consultation document?
Can I just say the options we've put before you today are our advice, and option 3 is the maximum level of investment we believe you can afford within your current constraints. It would probably create a tension and time frame to prepare a consultation document with a 4th option, because a 4th option would require some considerable change to your overall plan of investment and your willingness to rate to your community at a certain level.
But surely that's up to the elected members to decide.
Questions, yeah.
Yes, well, surely that's up to the...
That doesn't sound like a question.
I think that question has... Councillor Calvert, I think the question has been answered.
All right.
Okay, I don't see any other further questions on water, so we'll move on to the transport. Thank you, Siobhan.
Okay, so this really focuses on the Let's Get Wellington Moving programme. So as you'll all be aware, the government, ourselves, so Wakatahi, Wellington City Council, Greater Wellington Regional Council, who were the partners to the relationship funding agreement that underpinned Let's Get Wellington Moving, have agreed in principle to dissolve that partnership, with the understanding that central government will build and fund the Basin Reserve upgrades, the second Mount Vic tunnel, and provide opportunities for urban development and housing associated with those investments. It was also agreed that Council will bring Thornton Quay Hut Road and the Golden Mile projects in-house, as well as the City Streets programme. So if we think about Thornton Quay Hut Road and Golden Mile specifically, this is a great opportunity for Council to reset the relationships, those relationships with key stakeholders, so with retailers, hospos, all the ground floor that are largely impacted by significant construction works, and also an opportunity to reset the projects in line with our capital programme constraints. So there was an undertaking given to the Minister that we would look for cost efficiencies. So we are in the process of bringing those projects in-house. It is not straightforward. It's not something we can do overnight. There are HR processes associated with it. So we are undertaking our due diligence in terms of bringing those in. And that is really just want to give you that context in terms of the advice we're bringing you today. City Streets, so the City Streets programme is a programme of around 17 projects which are really focused on improving cycling, public transport, walking. The programme, Let's Get Rolling Moving programme, had almost finished the business cases for several of those projects. They didn't finish those projects or the business cases for them. The intention is to bring those in-house, but essentially amalgamate that with our bike network plan so that we come up with a combined multimodal program, which also enables us to deliver those bus priority improvements. So we get all of those improvements in cycling, public transport and walking. So again, that's quite a piece of work, an undertaking that's required from our planning guys to actually put that integrated transport plan in place. So in terms of the proposed budget allocation for this, at the moment we are continuing with what's in the budget as agreed and with the changes made for the 23-24 annual plan. So as you'll recall, we had increases to project budgets for Golden Mile and Thornton Quay Hut Road. We actually funded that from reducing the city streets and other budgets. So the proposal that you'll see on the 14th of February will just be the continuation of that. With the change that we will phase Golden Mile, so that would be basically phasing Courtney Place first, which would be a cost to council of around 27 million, and then Lambton Quay later, which is a cost of around 43 million. There will also be an option there to not do the Hut Road portion of Thornton Quay Hut Road, which would be a saving of $10 million for council, and that's what we'll be putting forward in a couple of weeks' time. Just that big caveat in red, they are indicative only and subject to change. As I said, we are working really, really hard getting under the hood of these projects to ensure that what we say we can deliver within the budgets we're given.
Okay, questions? Councillor Free.
Can you just outline briefly what sort of projects are still included in City Streets and what will happen to the $20 million behaviour change fund, which I think might be in the other?
Yeah, so again, we're really working through all of that detail, Sarah. So we actually will just assume what's currently in the budgets for that. We're not going to make any changes. We don't have time to do that. In terms of the types of projects, you had the Johnsonville projects, Featherston Street was in there. But I think the key priority, which wasn't in there, which we need to actually move on, is that second spine. So along the waterfront, which would be a key priority for us to basically do the planning and delivery of in the next 3 to 4 years.
So can we have some more information before we get to the vote?
Yes.
And has any thought been given to not doing the $20 million worth of behaviour change, given that the program has changed a lot?
Yeah, we can bring you some more information on that as well.
Councillor Abdurrahman.
I just wonder if under the city street, it's also renewal of some of the streets, like chip sealing is included.
Yes.
The transport.
Yep.
Okay, so in that case, I got a question because I have to give a context, Madam Chair. Okay. There are a lot of community members who approaching councillors, and some of the streets, they are really okay, they don't need to be invested on when we have other bigger issues. Only this year, 450,000 meters square, Wellington City Council is chip sealing. And some of those streets are absolutely fine. And one of the streets I currently live on is about to be done next month. And I think, is there a way we can cut those kind of cuts?
So a couple of things. It's very difficult to tell whether a road needs to be resealed just by looking at it visually. So we actually undertake some surveys of our roads every 3 years, I think, to actually determine the programme for renewals. So that's one point. The other point is that we are looking at putting forward a 75% of renewals of unconstrained renewal budget. So actually we will need to look at how we and how and when we reseal roads, and also whether we chip seal more roads than we currently have earmarked for asphalt at the moment.
Just a bit of follow-up to that. how are we able to respond to those communities who's asking the water flowing in their driveways, while we're investing on those streets? Again, if officers are not bringing us advice to cut that funding.
That advice was included in the December.
Yeah, that's an adjustment to the budget I understand we're already making, and I guess what we can answer them is the work that we're doing on the pipe renewals as outlined in the first section. So I think that has been covered, Councillor. Councillor Winera.
Oh, there you go.
You'll have to forgive me, I think I might have misheard you, but am I correct in understanding that the recommendation is that the Thorninghi Hut Road project not proceed? Did I hear that correctly?
So there is going to be an option provided whereby the Hut Road portion doesn't. So the Thorninghi is already underway. Yeah.
And that Hut Road portion would be a saving of approximately $10 million. The 22 odd million would remain of Thorninghi. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah.
Councillor Randall.
Yes, I'm just trying to get my head around how this plan is adjusted from the understanding in December. So first question is, in terms of Courtney Place going ahead, is Courtney Place going ahead according to the design that was approved by the traffic resolution, or are we going to also relook at some elements of the design and work with the business around that?
No, so the traffic resolution stands, so we wouldn't look to change that unless we absolutely had to. So the design itself, we need to look at that and see what we can actually deliver for the cost or for the budget that we've got. If we need to value engineer it, we will. So we have to go through that exercise, but in essence, the traffic resolution and all those decisions would stand.
Just wanted to note, before we move on to any more questions, I should have mentioned we are going to have a separate briefing about the Let's Get Wellington moving work and how it is going to change after being moved in-house. So while we will have this decision in February about the rephasing of the Golden Mile, there will be other questions, for example, that City Streets work and others that we can cover in more detail in that separate workshop. So sorry, Councillor Randall, back to you if you've got more questions.
No, thank you for the clarification.
Yes,
it's helpful. Secondly, what is the timeframe and budget for the second public transport spine that is needed because you're narrowing Courtney Place to the limit number of buses?
I'll come back to you with what budget we will be essentially inheriting from Let's Get Wellington Moving, but I think we do need to do a lot more work because that was in very early stages of planning, so we need to do more work to actually bottom out what that's going to look like.
Okay, and the last question is, in terms of this package going together, is further approval from NZTA required to co-fund some elements of those, or is all of the funding already pre-approved that you require?
Yep, all of the funding's there.
Okay.
Councillor Pannett.
Thank you. Just wondering, Courtney Place, why it's been given higher priority over, say, Lambton Quay?
I think from the consultation and the feedback that we've had from stakeholders that they see a more pressing need for Courtney Place end.
And I guess just given we're cutting our mitigation budget for climate change, which, as you know, I'm opposed to. I know you're doing some stuff, moving it to adaptation, but essentially it's a cut to mitigation. Is it possible to switch some of that budget to dealing with climate change immediately?
Well, I think what we're looking at here is trading off some of this money and Let's Get Wellington Moving for costs that we're proposing to add in for things like water meters and others. So again, if you were to make a change in decision, we'd need to think very carefully about how we would fund that or fund the water meters, etc., that we're proposing to add in under the option 3 that was discussed.
And in terms of walking and cycling, sorry, I don't want to take up the committee's time, but we'll get a bit more granular detail about exactly what will be cut, because definitely interested in that detail.
When you say cut?
Well, if there's, like, for example, on the Hut Road, I just want to know exactly what won't happen.
Yep.
Because there have been some concerns around cuts to walking. And Chair, can I just ask, I do want to ask about the Reading Cinema. When is the appropriate time to ask that?
Not in this workshop.
Okay, I'll ask it some other time then. Thank you very much.
Deputy Mayor Foon.
Yeah, kia ora, and following on from Councillor Pannett's questions, and probably will fall into the Let's Get Welly Moving workshop, but just wanting to confirm that we're still looking at filling in those gaps in the cycling network through the central city and out to the new Hutt Road resilience wall, etc. Yeah, thank you.
I think that's all of the questions. So the next section, I'm wondering if we want to do one more thing and have a break, or do you want to have a break now? The next section is the level of service.
No, it's the yes, it is. Yeah, the budget and the levels of service savings.
Do you want to take a quick 5-minute break, councillors? Okay, 5-minute break, and then we'll come back. to the next section, which is the budget. So over to you, Andrea.
Fabulous. So, look, I'm going to just give an update on some of the conversation that we had in December at the 14th of December workshop when we came back to you and said we had a 21.7% rates increase. We have got some levers to bring that down to 13.8%. And I'm going to just go back through those levers again, including providing some more detail on proposed changes to levels of service. So I want to work through that now. Just to be clear, and we've had the conversation on waters and transport, we haven't factored any of those changes through the 13.8%. We're yet to do that, and that will come in the papers that we bring to you on the 15th of February. So in terms of the update that we brought to you in December, in order to decrease our rates increase from the 21.7 to the 13.8, we had 5 different levers that we considered we could pull to make organisational savings right across the board. And the first one, we have a number of organisational initiatives. Those are some efficiencies that we're going to look at from 1 July that we can implement, and that has been reflected in our budget at $5 million. So we're making $5 million of additional savings, reflecting that we've made quite significant savings in previous long-term plans and annual plans as well. The second one is that in all of the information that we were providing to you about cost escalation and cost increases, of course, we had assumed we would fund that all through things like rates increases, but we have actually been working through the changes that we need to make to fees and charges, including things like increasing fees for inflationary increases, those kind of things. And as a result of that, we can divert some of that rates increase into increases in fees and charges as well. So we've worked through that process. We are looking at rationalising our asset base, and there are some assets that we have got that we're looking to sell out of our property portfolio, relatively small minor assets that don't deliver on or support the delivery of any service or council service, and so we will use that to offset some of our costs as well. Equally, there are assets that we think we don't need to fully fund the depreciation on. Now, in terms of depreciation funding, just as a reminder, in essence, we use the depreciation charge on assets, so the depreciation reflects the use of that asset over its life. So if you have an asset that's worth $100,000 and it's got a 10-year life, the depreciation on that usually would be about $10,000 a year. And so we expense that $10,000 a year, saying actually the community have used up $10,000 of that asset each year. And what we do is we fund that depreciation, so we have money put aside to reinvest back into that asset in the future. Now, there are some assets that we hold that we're depreciating, and we're funding that depreciation that we won't necessarily replace in the future. Or we could think about new ways to replace it, like getting grants or other funds or other community projects may want to fund that, or community initiatives, or we need to look at alternative mechanisms. So we're working through a number of those assets now to look at what would meet that kind of criteria. And lastly, we talked to you about a decrease in levels of service, and we had identified around $7 million within that that we want to talk to you about today. So these are the things that any change in levels of service, obviously, that has an external impact. Those are decisions that you need to make as elected members, and that's why we're going to be incorporating them within the 15th of February paper for your decision making at that point in time. I also understand there is a handout that gives you a wee bit more detail. Look at that, it's a handout and everyone pops up. So this gives a wee bit more detail just for you to support what's on the slide in case the slide isn't clear. So I will flick on the slide. And each of the chiefs are here as well who may be able to ask any clarification questions around the detail behind these proposed savings. So we are proposing to remove funding for composting hubs because, as you're aware, we're introducing our organics collection service. So we're looking at what the efficiencies are within that to make sure that we're not duplicating efforts in that space. We're proposing to decrease the free heritage advisory service. That is something that we provide now. We're looking at decreasing that. We're looking at moving from hard copy of our Wellington publication information to digital. Yes.
Happy New Year, Nicola.
We're looking at reducing our graffiti budget, and as I understand, that means that we're still looking to address graffiti mainly on our assets and services, but it will have a reduced levels of service in terms of how much graffiti we can actually clean up across the city. We do clean up graffiti on both our assets as well as private assets currently as well. In terms of the library network, we are looking at a $400,000 savings across the library network, and the details of that would need to be worked through. In 21-31, there was the proposed sale of the Wadestown Community Centre, which did not progress, and we think that that could continue to progress in the current long-term plan, and we're proposing to include that in. We obviously have CCTV cameras that we have across the city, and we monitor those. We're looking at what our role is in regards to those CCTV cameras and how we can deliver that kind of service in a more cost-effective way, which would include ceasing the live monitoring and seeking other funding for that work, because it's not a core service of ours in terms of the monitoring. We're looking at the closure of Kandala Pool and decreasing the hours in operation seasons at other pools. That is, and I just want to make that clear, that's a change from the 9th of November. So that was put up in the 9th of November paper, and that was retained in the 9th of November. So we are bringing that back again for council decision making. While there's an estimated savings there of operational expenditure, there's also a savings in CapEx and what we need to spend to upgrade the pool facility as well. We have a couple of events that we continue to that we've been providing. The New Year's Eve signature event, we provide annual fireworks as well. We think that those we can discontinue. And we're also looking at how we can better deliver service, so closing the Arapaki Service Centre, moving to a digital model, but also ensuring that those services, like other councils, actually are delivered through our libraries. We have some opportunities for property leasing arrangements. And there's a number of internal levels of service savings which we haven't included here because they don't actually require council decision making. They're relatively, benign things that we can actually do internally. So those are part of the line by line reviews that we've additionally picked up. So we're going to run with those. So I suspect there may be some questions on those, and I'll try and answer them as best I can, but likely default to my chief colleagues.
All right, Councillor Calvert.
And I'm not going to talk about Kandala Pool because you'll hear from me later on that one. But I want to ask a question about depreciation, and it was a slide that you referred to early on in earlier, right at the start of the presentation, and then the other one before then. So can I'm going to get back to water, and you said you'll be excluding water, but I understood that we are not fully charging or rates funding depreciation till around 28, 29. Is that still the case?
Yes, that is still the case.
So we're still not recovering all
We are still
depreciation.
Yeah, so that's correct.
Yeah.
We are still working to the process of a transitioned phasing of returning to fully fund depreciation for waters. What I can say is that we will still be collecting sufficient revenue from funding depreciations to invest back into the waters program that we have got underway in this. If we were to collect more or return to fully funding depreciation, we wouldn't be able to afford to spend that money anyway. That would have quite a significant increase in the rates.
Thank you.
Councillor Pannett.
Thank you. I'm curious about the library hours that always gets immediate kickback from the community. Like, what sort of level are we talking about? Thanks, James.
Kia ora, Councillor. There's multiple options for library hours which can be focused on one library, for example, the Arapaki Library. So if we were to go ahead and close the service centre, it would make logical sense to close the library as well, so that whole location can be given up. So that's one option, is going and targeting a specific one.
So that would just be a short-term one, obviously, until the new library opens, which was going to close in anyway. Okay.
Correct,
yep.
yeah.
Okay,
so it's about 18 months early if we did that. Through to shaving out off the whole network, basically. So there's multiple different options within that.
That never goes well, but we'll talk about that in debate. Thank you. The next question I had was around the composting hubs trial. Look, just trying to understand the implications of that. We really want to get moving because it's still a little way until we get our proper citywide, obviously integrated with the community, rolled out.
That's correct, yeah. We have 4 trial sites in motion at the moment. There's another 2 in progress towards that. So they're all committed to basically a 12-month period. There's no commitment beyond that 12-month period.
So, and you believe that by 2027, when we hopefully have our curbside, that work. But what about, not everyone is going to use that curbside collection. It's one of the issues. So that's why we have strongly supported a community initiative alongside.
So the assumption would be that the community then carries on doing that themselves under their own steam.
Okay. For discussion later, thank you. And then just Heritage Advisory Service. Sorry, what exactly do you mean by that? Is this just when people come up and ask what they can do to preserve their building, essentially?
That's right, Councillor. So we have a non-regulatory service, and so community interest groups, citizen research about particular aspects to their properties or a community group with a heritage interest. That's the service we currently provide and are proposing to reduce here.
How many people does it see, and how much does it cost to run? If you could just maybe get back to me.
Well, the cost estimates are there, and the estimated savings at 0.21.
How many people do you get to see every year?
The volume I'm not that familiar with, but I can provide that.
If you can provide that. Could I be put back on the list for another question? Thank you.
Councillor Abdurrahman.
Cool. Probably for the Chief Executive. How do you come with those figures when you say, example, for the $1 billion problem, cutting library hours to save 120 million, when we are investing about 300 million in library and in town hall 200 million, saving 200, how is that the social cultural economy saying, oh, you guys need to save this much and coming up with this figure? Or how did we get into that area of those savings?
Councillor, I'm not entirely sure I understand your question.
What about the process that developed these recommendations? How did they come to us?
So probably what I'm trying to understand is there is a different department in council, and James is one of for the social and cultural side. When we say we're going to cut library hours to save $120, how are we getting into that process of cutting those little things when we can focus in some other areas? And even when it comes to risk, for the community, it says here, community confidence in community. For me, cutting the library out is more than
speech. But you've asked a question.
So, so councillor, it is open to this council to give us direction on any area of service you would like to consider reducing in order to either reduce rates or increase capacity. And what the staff have done in response to discussions in previous workshops has come up with a list of ideas we are putting to you to show you the range of things that could be done in order to save the bottom line amount we have suggested as a means of reducing the rates burden on our city. The council can agree or disagree with these ideas or put forward other ideas, which we would welcome. And if there are other ideas, the sooner we have those ideas, the better, because we can cost them and give you advice on them in our report for the 15 February, isn't it? 15 February meeting. And so this process is actually really normal. The councils do this kind of thing all of the time, in weighing up the value of various services, the costs of them, and whether there are areas you would be willing to tweak. And it's always very difficult, of course, to take away things that a community is used to having. But that's a tough kind of question we have to ask ourselves at a time like this.
Wanted to add as well, the Mayor is going to be starting a process where she is going to be having meetings with councillors and coming up with her proposal of the kind of mix of these sort of recommendations that we can get a majority support around. So you'll have an opportunity to speak with the Mayor and give feedback on those as well before that meeting.
Definitely, Madam Chair. My question is still as though, how are we coming to those decision makings from officers' perspective? Is that the CEO or the chief financial officer asking, we want to save this amount of money, how much can you save from the social cultural, or the social and cultural committee themselves coming up and saying that, oh, we're going to cut this, we can save 7 million. Are we giving them a direction from one side, or how that is coming up? That's my question.
Perhaps can I answer that, Councillor? At the December briefing, we identified the $7 million, which Andrea has actually explained, in the range of levers, and we went away and looked at basically right across the whole organisation through each chief officer, ideas that could contribute to that number. But as the chief executive said, that's a list that's come from officers, but ultimately it's a decision for the council to make.
Okay, I'm next on the list, and my question was, I had one sort of question about the library network, and similar to sort of Councillor Pannett asked, but I'm wondering if the advice that we get about how that proposed saving is achieved could also interact with that advice around Arapaki, because do libraries, are we cutting hours when we're making those the service centre, and what does that mean for the community? So is that sort of clear what I'm...
I think this is what you said, so tell me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
So if we were to cut the service centre, we wouldn't cut the entirety of the resourcing. We would deploy some of that into the libraries network. The libraries network already does some of the services that are performed by the service centre, but a very limited amount. The idea would not be to transfer services into the libraries, because in essence that's just moving workload from one place to another. The idea would be that where services can and are digitised, so for example the paying of rates, that we basically say to the public, you have to pay your rates digitally or go into a bank or a post office and pay them there.
What I'm really asking is that if there is any kind of cut to opening hours across the library service, and that becomes the place where most people, for example, go and get extra recycling bags, because Arapaki is closed, if we're considering that as part of the advice?
Through you, Chair, I think on the 15th we should include in the papers specifically what's out, what the proposal is, so that you can understand, and as James has outlined, there are some options, but we need to come back with something a little bit more specific so that you know what you're agreeing to.
That's useful, but you've heard that point about how those two things are connected? Anyway, I'll talk to you offline. And my other question was about Wadestown Community Centre, because there was agreement basically to sell in the last LTP, but also an agreement that funding would be retained for community services within that community. So is the proposal essentially to not do that second part? Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. All right. Councillor Winera.
Yeah, could I just have clarity? The annual fireworks are listed as a non-New Year's Eve event. Am I going correct? When else do we do fireworks?
So they were traditionally on Guy Fawkes, November the 5th. They didn't move to Matariki That wasn't popular, so we moved last year. We did them during the FIFA World Cup. So we haven't actually decided this year when they're going to be.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Councillor McNulty.
Just a point of clarification. If I was to hold my nose and throw this whole suite of cuts into the LTP for public consultation, elected members would have a chance to then take that feedback on from consultation and withdraw or pull back on some of these. Would that be the case?
Yes, in terms of consultation, we'll get to that in a few slides, but we're consulting on 3 big issues, but these things were also open for feedback, and ultimately your deliberations in May, I think it is, where you get to kind of finally decide the shape of the plan. So these would be in if you agree to them on the 15th, but they're not kind of final until you have heard feedback and make those decisions.
Given your experience with past LTPs, does it sort of start with you bring a suite this big, this many go in, we hear back from the community and that much makes it through in the end? Is that sort of a fair direction of travel?
Well, here's a true story. When I was at Kapiti Coast, we consulted on cutting the economic development budget. It actually increased more than what we actually had in it. So just a story.
I think as chair, we've had this kind of conversation back and forth because this is an iterative process. However, my advice as chair to councillors would be, if there's something that you do not want to see in a final version, I wouldn't vote for it on February 15th. Yeah. This is our most sort of substantive decision making for the budget, and then it goes into, yes, public feedback, we can make changes. However, we get into audit processes, etc.
Can I just add, if it's helpful for clarification, what we're talking about is a savings of approximately 2% for these particular, and the sum of these initiatives. So just to help you form your views, for every $4 million we spend in operational expenditure, that's 1% on rates. So that would be the trade-off, because if we choose not to take up some of these options, I've got too many double negatives there. Then the implication is we'd have to still fund this by rates, and so what would that look like? So it would be a rating increase.
Councillor Randall.
Thank you. So I understand it's an issue of process, but it's also a concern that we've essentially got 2 weeks to sort of throw this all together and then get all those sort of options. I've been working off a kindly shared spreadsheet version of the draft long-term plan. Can we get an updated version of that?
As noted, we've got a number of changes to make through that, so we'll have to have that ready and for the papers for the 15th of February, so we can share the same level of activity information that we've shared with you, and at that point in time, and for the full 10 years.
Yes. Okay. So, just in terms of what we did from comparing the current year with the initial draft that we received, just wanted to ask you through a couple of examples what we should do, because obviously you've assessed these things. I note, for example, that there's an activity called Cycleway Asset Management that has gone up by over 300% to over $500,000 in the next year. What is it? We would say we need to find out what that is as well before we can work out whether we should ask for it to be cut. What's the best way to do that?
Well, I think if you've got those list of questions, then we've asked people to feed them back through me, and then I can compile where we can, and we've got the capacity to do so. Just noting that, comparisons with 2021 versus what we're proposing.
This is 23-24.
Okay. We're working under different long-term plans, so there could be changes in the way that we've labelled or named things. There'll be those kind of things. The best thing to do is to ask me or ask one of the chiefs, because they'll know their budgets and what's in there and what the changes are accordingly.
Yes. I've got one specific one I want to table because it's quite a large amount. There's a thing called Waterfront Public Space Management that's got an increase of $4.7 million. Have you got any information about that?
No, we'll have to come back to you on that one.
Okay, and last question. We had a discussion this morning around the waste management program, and obviously the zero waste program is one of the things that's coming forward as an important business case. How is it that we can get some information around that? Is it still to come in this workshop, or is it separate?
No, it is. It's coming very shortly.
Okay, I think that's good.
Almost like you could see the future there, Tony. Oh no, that's frightening. Councillor Panovich.
Just a clarification. So we're only dealing with operational expenditure items here, aren't we? We're not dealing with things like the library, which are capital expenditure and debt funded.
Yes, with the exception of, so the list of savings here are all operational expenditure savings. So the substantive portion of decisions around debt-funded activities or the capital expenditure program was done on the 9th of November. Have I got that date right? I'll look at you. So yes, that was done on the 9th of November. Now we're looking at operational savings. So those things that are largely directly funded through rates. The one caveat I'd have around that is obviously with the Wadestown Community Centre, the swimming pool operations, there will be a capital expenditure element there as well, because we won't be including future budgets to invest in those assets.
Okay, and just to follow on, so this 7 million is only related to the next year's component of the annual plan?
It will continue on, because of course what we're trying to seek here is permanent savings from budgets.
Okay, so that just semi-answers my question. If we take the fireworks out of next year, we're taking it out for 9 additional years. Okay,
yeah, thank you.
Just so everyone knows.
Got too excited there, John. Deputy Mayor Fung.
Yay. Thank you. Back to the composting hubs trial. Can I just understand there's an organics fund in the waste department? Are officers proposing that that will not continue through the next LTP also?
I think we might have to come back to you on that one, Deputy Mayor.
Councillor Free.
I just wondered if any thought had been given to our grants and whether there are savings, potential savings there.
I think some of that was covered in the November meeting last year. Yeah.
So we did cover some of those on the 9th of November meeting. Some decisions were made around that, but because those decisions had been made, we didn't want to further make suggestions for cuts.
You don't think there is any extra there? Okay.
That's not the officer recommendation, but if you want us to look at that, we...
Councillor Pannett.
Thanks. It was just a question about the asset sales. So is it just going to be really clear with the community if we
have a section on that too.
Okay.
Shall we?
Can I just seek a clarification? Is that the asset sales in terms of the savings or the airport sales? I think it's the former.
It was the former, actually, just because you raised it in the section.
Sorry, Iona.
No, that's totally fine. So I guess, look, I know we've got some low value ones, but once they're gone, they're gone. So are we just going to make that clear in the communications with the public, just so they can go, or I'd rather that you use that money to buy it or contribute to another asset that was more worthwhile, that would give us some money?
We're not proposing to specifically consult on that, because they are low level and they wouldn't make the consultation criteria, but it's just part of our normal recycling of assets. We can come back to you with some further advice on that, I think.
I think that would just be helpful, even if it's not worth a lot, if we're not accumulating more. Yeah, that'd be helpful. Thanks.
Okay, I think we've run out of questions, so we can move on to the next section.
We'll go changing of the guard.
Oh, Raina. Haere mai.
Kia ora koutou. I hope you all had a great break and you're back refreshed, ready to hit the ground running. So on the 14th of November, we had a workshop with you on the revenue and financing policy, and at that time we talked about bringing this back to you through these workshops. through this workshop today. So the revenue and financing policy is a document that we need to prepare every long-term plan. It is one of the fundamental documents that helps build the budget, and it talks around how we fund our activities, who benefits from those activities, whether it be an individual, a part of the community or the whole community. And on that basis, we do some funding analysis and look at who should pay what. It also looks at who creates the need for that activity and therefore who should pay. There's quite a few bits and pieces that we ran through in November, which we've got on this slide here for you, which talks around some of those principles that we follow and take into consideration when we're looking at each activity. On the 15th of February, we will be bringing you an updated and draft revenue and financing policy that will be included in the papers for you. Along with that will be a list of proposed user fee changes. So we've made some changes around the activity structure. We've removed some activities. We've combined some activities just to make it a bit easier and more understandable. Some other things that we've changed is around the funding bands. We used to have a fixed percentage of, say, user fees funding versus rates funding. We've changed that now to a band just to create a bit more flexibility with the policy itself. We've created an expectation of annual inflationary adjustments, changes to overall funding considerations, and of course taken into consideration the rating policy review as well. As part of looking at the updated policy, we compare that to what we've currently got in the budget and how those activities align with the policy. On that basis, there's essentially 68 activities, 7 areas where the policy does not align to the budget, and 16 areas where there's been proposed changes over and above inflation. We haven't got all of that information here for you today. We will be providing that in the paper for the 15th of February. But some of the activity areas that don't align are things like marinas, housing, which is actually a ring-fenced activity, golf course, passenger transport network, and other things like recreation programs, cycle network, roads and open spaces. We will provide, like I said, more information on that in the paper for the 15th of Feb. So as part of our budget each year, we inflate our revenue as well as our expenses. And in order to achieve that inflated revenue, we either have to increase the fees to meet that or increase the volume. So we look at fee changes as part of setting the budget to try and achieve that revenue. So just in summary, we have updated the policy to include the annual inflation. We've noted temporary non-alignment. One of the other things from the 12th of December that Andrew presented as a proposed lever was to increase our revenue through user fees and charges by an extra $5 million to help offset that rates increase. So that's part of the work that we've been doing as well. Most of our fees will be increasing by inflation. That, however, is a decision for you on the 15th of Feb. I will note, though, that that revenue will already be included in the budget, and if there are decisions to not increase a fee, that would reduce the revenue and increase the rates funding required. Does that make sense? So there are some fees that we can't increase, or we can't increase further than we already have, for things like swimming pools, where big increases in fees would mean a whole lot of people wouldn't be coming swimming, negative impact on our tamariki learning how to swim and things. We are restricted to a reasonable cost recovery rather than making a profit for our activities. So we can't just increase our fees to collect a whole lot of revenue when we're not having to spend spend that on that activity. There's also some activities where there's not a huge amount of revenue, so increasing the fees is not going to be significant as well. Here is a list of some of the fees that we will be bringing back to you on the 15th of Feb. There's a mixture of new fees, there's some fees that will be increasing over and above inflation, and there's a few different options for changes to parking fees. So that $5 million that I mentioned as increased revenue is mainly currently being funded through increased and new parking fees. So there's quite a list there. There's parking, swimming pools, marinas, waterfront, cemeteries, network-wide control and management. You can ask questions about them when we get to that point. But yeah, once again, all of that information will be coming to you on the 15th of Feb, as well as some explanations for those fees.
Perhaps if I could just jump in there and say that Q&A session that we're talking about will be a good opportunity to once you've received the detail, to actually be able to jump in and ask more specific questions than we've kind of got time for today.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I did have one question from Councillor Abdurrahman, so let's see if we can answer that today.
Cool. You talked about fees, new fees for parking. Are you specifically talking about bringing a parking meter around some suburbs, including Newtown and Berhampur?
Yeah. James to answer that.
So you're bringing a Newtown currently paid parking on top of parking permit for residents, is that right?
Sorry, I think I took your like Newtown as meaning in kind of contrast to Newtown. So it would be, it could be any areas, but there's some areas that we've identified such as Johnsonville, Kilbirnie, Karori, etc., where we don't currently have those parking meter type fees.
Interesting.
Councillor Pannett.
Just had someone ask me about charging more for people who want to put out boards on footpaths, because they're obstructive to people who are trying to access our footpaths.
We'll have a look at that one.
That would be awesome. And sorry, the things like, you've just said you're not going to have heaps of increases for swimming pools, but there is some kind of increase.
Yeah, so there will be some for inflation, but not over and above that.
Okay. And waste minimisation, so that will, you might argue that's okay for a good increase.
Yes, so that waste minimisation is one that there's a big increase over and above inflation.
How much?
I'm not sure. I can come back to you.
Okay, but you've still got swimming pools on that list. Sorry, I was just getting...
Yeah, that shouldn't be on that list.
Oh, that shouldn't be on that. Okay, that is cool. So looking forward to the detail on that. Thank you.
Councillor Young.
Yes. Just in case you thought I'd lost my voice. Good news is I haven't. So when you've got fee increases golf course, that's the Berhampur golf course, I assume.
Yes, I believe so.
So are we also contemplating closing it down and returning it to the town belt? Is that a possibility?
A vote. We already had a vote on that issue earlier, and we didn't vote for it. So
will you vote again?
So and that's up to councillors if you want to bring an amendment.
So what does Wellington Gardens mean?
That will be like the botanical gardens.
But we don't charge.
There must be some higher-edge fees for some of the venues and things.
Okay, okay. And then the other one, charged up capital, are those EV things?
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Abdurrahman, you had another question?
Yeah. My question would be, currently we don't have a parking management plan for other suburbs. We have the one that we currently approved for Berhampur and Newtown. So the new parking fee you're bringing is specifically targeting those communities? Or do you have a plan to introduce parking management plan before the next LTP in May in some other areas?
I'll pass it on to James.
We would do those parking management plans first. So it would be a necessary prerequisite.
So this discussion this is going to be part of the long-term plan, which means if this is adopted, it's going to be implemented on what is already there. That is including Berhampur and Newtown, where we recently approved the parking management plan. Is that right?
Correct.
Good luck.
Councillor, stop it. That's all the questions on that. Oh, sorry, Councillor Free.
What's the charged up capital? Can you just explain exactly what that is?
So that will be a charge for EV vehicles at charging spaces.
Oh, have we given any thought as to whether the charging stations we're putting in are actually returning value to the ratepayer? I mean, I just wonder actually if we should even be doing that at all. I guess that's an amendment or something to discuss.
Yeah, and there'll be more details in the paper that comes on the 15th of Feb as well.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Right, I think that's all of the questions. So we now, how many have we got? One more? Two more?
We've got a couple more.
Okay, let's keep going, and you let me know if you need a little break, councillors. Oh, Councillor Free, did I ever get to you? Yes, Oh, sorry. I must need the break. My apologies. All right, next section.
Kia ora, councillors. Just wanted to, as normally happens with these things, budgets and projects are changing in a dynamic way. You will recall that last year we brought the development plan for Frank Kitts Park to you. You adopted wisely a two-stage approval process, and the first one was adopting the development plan, which you did do, and you sent us away to do some work on costings, the heads of key commercial terms, if you like, for the Whale Malai Trust, and of course an LTP funding window. So we're highlighting the fact that this is back. We've got an additional 40 million in capex in the out years planned. That's based on the quantity surveyor costings for the redevelopment of the development plan you approved last year. And but we're also highlighting to you that the proposal would be of the 6.5 million allocated to the Chinese garden, that would push 3.5 of that into the outer years, and use 3 million to lock in a resource consent approval for the whole redevelopment of the park. And so this is new information. We're bringing it to you for consideration later on the 15th, I believe. Any questions?
Deputy Mayor Phone.
Yeah, can you just re-explain that? So the 6.5 million is currently aside for the Chinese garden, just explain that's for the groundworks, is that correct?
So that's the council's contribution to that garden redevelopment in the current LTP.
And so can you just re-explain the proposal?
So the proposal is to defer 3.5 million of that into the out years and do the planning, resource consenting and approvals in the first 3 years.
Okay. And will that 3.5 million still cover the groundworks that will be needed for the Chinese garden?
No, that will just be the detailed planning required and the consenting required to get it over the line.
One more question. So does that mean we'll need to raise further money to meet our obligation for the garden?
So the outer years had been indicated at over 40 million for the capex required to redevelop the whole gardens, including the Chinese garden.
Thank you.
Councillor Pannett.
Thank you very much for this. So the Chinese Garden Society is fully committed to going ahead. Honestly, it just seems to be going on forever, obviously. So
that's right. We've been working with all three parties: the Whale Malai Trust, the Chinese Garden, and group, and of course the council parks team that have been helping us redesign this park.
Okay, and the Whale Malai, are they making progress since we last?
We're progressing well. So I think in April 24th of April, we're bringing you the heads of terms, the key commercial terms that we've been negotiating.
Okay, great. Thanks.
That's all the questions on that. Liam, you got off very lightly there. I'm sure it'll come later. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Look, we've just got a couple of slides on the financial strategy and infrastructure strategy. These are like foundational documents that underpin the entire LTP. They're a little bit different. They look out 30 years rather than the 10 years, so the LTP's kind of got a 10-year horizon. These two documents have got a 30-year horizon. And in essence, their purpose is to look through the long term in terms of financial sustainability. That's the focus for the financial strategy. And then also the infrastructure looks at the infrastructure needs of the city over that period of time. Previously, we've combined these strategies. That's how we've done them over the last couple of LTPs. We've had a really good review of the LTP and its component parts, and as part of this LTP, we've separated them out. That just allows us to build more detail into both these documents, which is appropriate at this point in time. I'll let Raina talk through the financial strategy because she's leading on that, and then I'll take you through the infrastructure strategy.
Thanks, Bez. So you will recall last year we had multiple workshops as well on the financial strategy. It is a fundamental document for the long-term plan and helps set the strategic direction for that 10 to 30-year period. There were three main focus areas for this financial strategy: managing immediate affordability constraints, the infrastructure deficit and how we deal with that, and easing balance sheet constraints. So the key strategies are around prudent management and prioritisation of investment programs, risk management of the investment in infrastructure assets, and resilience of our council's balance sheet. We have had some workshops around the balance sheet in particular, and the airport shares and ground leases. That forms a big part of our financial strategy for this long-term plan. There's two limits within the financial strategy that we set, and that's on rates and debt. We are proposing for the debt to revenue ratio to remain at 225%, and based on where we're looking at landing, and we'll be confirming that once we've got a budget for the 15th of February, it's looking like, excluding the $272 million for the insurance headroom, we will stay within that limit and for the first 5 years, and then after that it will be in the limit, including that headroom as well. For the rates limit, we're looking at an average rates increase over the 10 years of between 5 to 8%. We do note, however, that for the first 3 years of the long-term plan, it will be higher than this, but over the remainder of the long-term plan averages out to be around 5% increase per annum. And obviously prioritising renewals in early years. I think that was all from that one, and I'll pass back to Baz for the infrastructure strategy.
I'll put my mic on. Just in terms of the infrastructure strategy, I think it's important to note that we own a lot of assets on behalf of the community and manage those assets. So it's about $10 billion. About 3/4 of that, or 2/3 of that, is three waters and transport. So the vast majority is on that horizontal infrastructure. The remainder is our facilities, whether they're parks and gardens or libraries and so on and so forth. And in essence, the purpose of the infrastructure strategy is to look across those different asset groups and identify the key challenges in relation to those assets, and then come up with strategic responses in relation to them. So that's the infrastructure in a nutshell. I think it's a little bit hard to do justice to the strategy in one slide, but I think once we get the document out, I think we'll use the Q&A as the opportunity to go through both of these strategies in a bit of detail.
I've got a question from Councillor Pennant.
Thanks. These are obviously huge topics. And thank you for identifying some of the challenges. I'm just wondering, is equality able to be added to that along with affordability? Or did you not think that that was so much of an issue?
So we've identified what we think are the key challenges. Obviously, that you could have a range of challenges that's as long as your arm. We've identified, I think, the top 5, and we've built the strategy around that. If you think there are amendments needed to the strategy, the 15th is the time to raise those.
So if I can just highlight that, I will probably be doing that, and it's a big topic. I guess just, look, they're both related. Whether we're planning enough for the enormous costs of climate change. So, look, you've done a great job. You managed to keep the temperature down on this budget. There's nothing too really massively contentious. But I think we'll leave that to the 15th. But just in terms of those big costs coming up around actually funding the adaptation work, obviously we're doing some work, but we're going to need to do more. So are you confident that in setting these limits that we will have the headroom? And also, of course, as insurance costs increase, we're going to need to figure out a different approach. Well, I know we've got a roadmap. So it's a big topic.
That is a big topic. So reflecting that, of course, we're operating within the current restraints that we've got within our existing budget balance sheet. I think what you'll see reflected in the infrastructure strategy is an ongoing story about obtaining better information about the impact of climate change and how we're looking at mitigating and adapting to that. Because, of course, we're still collecting better information around what those impacts are, what that means, and actually telling a story about that. You know, and there's lots going on in the current long-term planning around, you know, how we choose to invest in our infrastructure that's built into our asset management plans, but that's going to be something that's continuing to evolve. The really important thing within the financial strategy and the infrastructure strategy is how we tell where we're currently at, where we're looking to collect better information, and how that will continue to inform our planning going forward. So it's a bit more of a storytelling exercise. Baz might want to add a few more comments in that space.
No, I think you've covered it off.
Okay, maybe talk. Well, actually, sorry, we know what some of the impacts will be. Like some communities are going to be at risk or are not going to be able to stay there. So I guess, how long is this information process going on for?
Are you talking about the adaptation planning work?
Yeah, for example, I just obviously we're in the 2020s. We know that we've got some critical deadlines of 2030. It just sort of, I guess, where's the urgency would be my question.
I think we maybe need to have a look at the papers, do you think, Iona? I mean, I get your point is being made. I think we probably need to have a look at the papers and then look at them, you know, with
it's
that
just
lens.
That there's such big topics,
yes,
and it
exactly
will not be done by a simple amendment. But yeah, I'll wait till I read it.
Okay,
thank you.
Yeah, they are covered off quite extensively in both documents, but we'll get there.
And sorry, there was just one more question. Look, obviously, I feel burned by some of the water stuff in the past. I guess, are you confident? This is a Siobhan question too, that the asset management planning is much better now so that we can say to the public, look, we're on the right track with water, and that's good information.
I'm confident it's much better than it was 3 years ago.
Read between the lines there. Right, Councillor Abdurrahman.
Cool, thank you again. Do you agree with the notion that Wellington City Council is bad at managing its assets? If yes...
No, I think this is a highly political question.
Yes.
I think it's debate, really. I mean, I don't think we're asking whether staff agree with a certain principle. Come to the second part of your question, Councillor.
Yes. If no, if yes, why? If no, how do you explain a property that leased 20 years ago still generates the same amount of money for City Council?
So the question you're asking is about our ground leases and why the rents haven't adjusted?
That relate to we are selling because we are bad at managing assets? That's the question.
I think you are. It's debate, my friend, and I think we will save that for debate. Councillor Randall. Did you have a question? Thank you.
I was wondering if you go back to the slide about financial strategy. So I just want to ask a question about the fact that we're looking to have a 225% debt to revenue ratio excluding the insurance headroom instead of including insurance headroom. Is that's a change to our financial strategy?
We're not looking to change the limit. We're wanting to ensure that our limit and our own own kind of headroom is inclusive of the insurance headroom. So as the limit that we have set is 225% debt to revenue inclusive of the insurance headroom. What Rainer has indicated and what we reflected to you in December is that we will be breaching that limit because we've got that capacity, but we're showing how we're getting back under that 225% limit over the course of the strategy itself.
Okay, so given we have this limit, could officers provide a couple of options so that we don't breach the limit?
Well, I think the limit is something that you as councillors want to set and indicate where you think you want us to manage accordingly. We don't want to change the limit to reflect necessarily what we're actually achieving. You know, the limit is an internal measure, but we can actually borrow much more significantly than that. That's the covenant. So, you know, the limits that we set are ones that we're trying to manage to. The current financial situation reflects that we have got pressures in our ability to do that. And I think it's important that we reflect to the community what the plan is to manage how we get back to that position over the long term. But you know, if you want to increase the limit, that would be something that you could make a decision on.
I certainly don't want to increase the limit. So I'm actually the opposite. We're essentially looking at a long-term plan for the next 3 years, fundamentally without the safety net of $272 million of borrowing capability should something really bad happen to the city. So we're sort of losing.
I think you're getting into a speech again, Councillor.
I'm just again asking in terms of, you know, can we have an option where we don't spend so much capital such that we can preserve the
That's entirely a decision that you as elected members can make. The way that you can influence that is either through decreasing your capital expenditure program or through increasing revenue opportunities, i.e. rates.
Okay, thanks.
Right, I have a couple more questions on this section, and then I suggest we take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back, and then I will be fresher as well. Right, Councillor McNulty.
I'm just wondering what our projection for the interest rate environment is over the LTP and where we're buying that from, because obviously that's going to play pretty critically into our debt capacity.
Yeah, great question. What you will also receive on the 15th of February is a list of the working assumptions that we're working towards. That also includes a description of the risks around those assumptions and what that means in terms of the practical implications, so what the uncertainty is. I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. They're in the range of the 4% in terms of the cost of borrowing. That's relatively low level of risk in terms of the assumptions we're making, because of course we have our hedging arrangements in place. We have got quite a lot of certainty in that space and managing that risk quite well. But those assumptions will come to you on the 15th of February. That's quite a comprehensive document that includes, you know, borrowing costs, you know, all of the other assumptions that we've made in pulling together these budgets.
Deputy Mayor Thune.
This might be a bit premature, but just process question around just assessing the amount that's coming for the 15th. Can you let us know when will we be getting the papers for these? Is there any way they could be staggered or phased so we're getting them earlier? And do we need to allocate more time for the 15th meeting?
Perhaps we'll have a think about that and come back to you, but on the 15th I think it's pretty much an all-day meeting, so there's nothing else on that agenda, I don't think. There might be some minor things, but it's really all about this particular topic.
Councillor Abdurrahman.
I just still want to follow up from my previous question, because I think it's operational and a policy matter, and it will help me in making a decision coming February 15. So do you think it's a policy failure for Wellington City Council not charging a property that leased 20 years ago the same price? If instead of solving that policy issues, selling the assets is going to solve a problem, which I disagree with. Could you please is that a policy failure?
I don't think there's no policy surrounding that. Those are actual legal contracts that we have with those properties. So they're lease agreements and they're standard lease agreements. So they're contractually agreed with the property owner, with the lessee.
Hang on. From my understanding, if a property leased from Wellington City Council to renew, it takes 20 years, and then for 20 years they will pay the same amount of money. That's my understanding from previous email that I had from you. Is that right?
I think what Andrea is saying is that is a lease rather than a policy. So there's no policy that determines what is in those lease agreements. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's the lease agreement, and we have those lease agreements for 21 years.
In that case, if it's not policy failure, does that mean operationally managerial failure?
Councillor Abdurrahman, I'm not sure where you're trying to take these questions, but I think what we have said is that there are leases in place for a very long term, and they are being managed within the terms of the lease, and I don't think that it's appropriate to lead the officers to start speculating about whether you consider that to be good management or not. It's a decision that has been made over a very long period of time, and today's managers are managing those leases in sync with the terms of those leases.
Okay, we'll move on. Councillor McNulty.
Just for the joys of the internet, you can have live discussions while in here. So, in Kandala Pool, is the ability of doing a targeted rate for just Kandala residents to support the functioning or operation of that facility?
Well, yes, that would be an option, I would guess. I would need to look at that very carefully and go through the legal process. But the concept of setting a targeted rate means, those paying for it. But I guess the question is what are you targeting it? How are you targeting it? Are you targeting it to a region or in a particular area? Because how do you know that that's going to be that's going to cover the people that use that pool? I mean, it's very complicated and very difficult to be able to kind of answer that in the abstract. You're more likely in this kind of situation to, set fees and charges for the use of that particular pool, but that's not how we set fees and charges more broadly.
Councillor Free.
Yeah, just a little question about the insurance. Insurance headroom, yes, but I take it that's on top of our ordinary insurance arrangements, and we do have some other arrangements.
We most certainly do have other insurance arrangements, but we know that there is an increasing gap in the amount of insurance that we can secure from the market, and what we can secure, it's becoming more and more costly. And so we are looking at how we make sure we are adequately managing our risks through the insurance roadmap. And we've got lots of tools and levers that we're trying to pull in that space. And one of those is ensuring that we have sufficient headroom in case there is a disaster, so we can at least respond in some way.
Okay.
All right, we're going to actually take a 15-minute break. We'll come back at 3:15. Thank you. One or two sections to go? Two. Thanks, team. Is the mics?
Right, two more sections to go. One of them is around process and next steps, but before we get there, just want to talk through the consultation document. I think we've talked about it before, but it's worth repeating that within a long-term plan, there are specific requirements in terms of how they are built and how the consultation document is built. So we actually consult under what's called the Special Consultative Procedure under the Local Government Act, and it's quite prescriptive in terms of how you put your content together as well as the process. The biggest thing to note is that we can't go out with a draft of the LTP, right? It's too big, too many issues, and so there is a requirement to identify the significant issues and consult on those, which is in essence the consultation document. The other thing I think is worth pointing out also is throughout that process of consultation, it's important for all councillors and elected members to retain an open mind and be seen to have that open mind before final decisions are made in late May. Just in terms of how we pull together what are the significant proposals for a consultation document, there are statutory guidance in place. We also use our own significance and engagement policy, which provides a roadmap for identifying significance. And then, of course, we work with our audit team as well, and they help refine with us as well. So what happens with the consultation document is it has the significant proposals, and generally they are either 2, 3 or 4 big issues that you go out and consult with. You do that in a lot of detail. And then there is other supporting information in the consultation document, whether that's a summary of the infrastructure strategy or the financial strategy or other key features, and you summarise those and then you direct them people to the website for more information. So people can feed back on everything, but there is a requirement to focus on the significant issues. So for us, we've gone through that process. We've analysed the issues and determined significance, and in essence, the 3 things that are going through into the CD are the 3 waters funding, the establishment of a perpetual investment fund through the sale of airport shares to diversify our investment and deal with some of that insurance risk, and then, of course, something that you've worked through independently through a separate process is the waste collection, changes to Council's waste approach to meet the zero waste targets that have been set by the Council. We had previously talked to you about the City to Sea Bridge, but we'll be dealing with that in a separate process down the line when the rest of Te Ngākau Master Plan has been established. Very quickly, and I'm not going to go through it in a lot of detail, but in terms of the perpetual investment fund through the sale of airport shares, there's 3 options. There is the full sale and the establishment of the PIF. We can also, of course, transfer some of the ground leases in future if that's the case as well. There's the partial sale option, and of course there is the status quo, which is the do not sell option. In terms of waste, it's a little bit more detailed. There are a few more permutations, and that's just a reflection of the complexity of the issue. But in essence, there's two big questions. So the options for bags or wheelie bins, and whether to introduce organics, and our preferred one is highlighted there in F. And the other option is around increasing the size of a recycling wheeling bin and whether to change glass collection method as well. So there's a range of options in that space as well. And once again, we can go through this in a bit more detail as part of the Q&A that we're going to schedule. I haven't got the waters one written down, so in essence, it would reflect the advice in the previous slides, and we'll bring that through to the 15th as well. So the other feedback items that I've talked about, so you've got the big significant issues. Of course, we'd be taking feedback on the budget, the rates. We've got fees and user charges, which of course the community is very interested in, so we'll be looking for feedback in that space. There's the financial policies, the financial strategy, infrastructure strategy, and of course the level of service changes that we've talked about a couple of slides ago as well. So there'll be community interest in that, and so we'll provide the ability for the community to provide feedback on those as well. Just my last section, just a couple more slides. Just want to talk through next steps. Early Feb, we're going to do the drop-in session. They haven't been scheduled yet, but we'll put those in place. In essence, the two highlighted in red dates are your decision dates. Okay, so 15th of February is your draft deliberations. It's in essence when you're considering the issues and making decisions about what's included in the consultation document. After that, we do have another conversation with our Audit and Risk Committee around the process and the program of work. On the 13th of March, you agree the consultation document and it then goes to audit, and the auditors go through it all, and then it goes out for consultation. And we'll be consulting through 12 April to 12 May, so for a full month, if you like. There'll be public hearings during that period as well, so there'll be an opportunity for those that want to come in and orally speak to you, that they have the ability to do so. We'll analyse all the feedback that is written, and then we'll come back to you on the 30th of May, and that'll be the final deliberations in terms of your second decision point in terms of what finally makes up the final LTP. And then that gets prepared, audited, and then you adopt in late June. So that's the final process in a relative amount of detail. Just also quickly noting, we've got that internal survey for councillors as well, where you can have your say, and that'll feed into the mayor's office, so she can consider that in terms of her proposals. So this is just my absolute last slide. So this is the documents and the content that you will be receiving very shortly that you will consider on the 15th. So it's the financial strategy, infrastructure strategy, the budget, levels of service changes, significant forecasting assumptions, the revenue financing policy and the fees and charges, and also draft activity statements. So it's all the core components that underpin the LTP you'll be considering on the 15th. And I'll leave it there.
Councillor Abdurrahman.
Could you please remind me if the KPMG report on airport boards is released or not?
Yes, it has. It's on our website.
So that a deducted version or the whole?
There is some redactions for commercial sensitivity, but those are relatively minor in terms of the report itself.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the process or the consultation document? Councillor McNulty.
Not a question. I just want to say thank you for one of the best briefings I've had here.
Thank you. Thank you. It looks like there aren't any other questions. So that is the last, so that's brought us to the end. So yes, I just want to reiterate Councillor McNulty's thanks for all of the work that has gone into this and the other 24 briefings. And Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, just when will we get the slides? Have we got them?
We can circulate that shortly.
Thank you.
Councillor Randall.
Where will we get the spreadsheets?
Oh.
I'll see you.
All right. I see none of us have changed much over the over the break. Thank you very much, team. A lot of information today, and look forward to a very robust meeting on the 15th of February and some Q&As to come before that. Thank you.